All right, so this is the last lab of the semester. This is the Earthworm Lab. Typically we go out and we'll sample earthworms using 3 different methods. Today we're only going to do one method. I'm going to show you or talk about all 3, but we're going to sample with one method. So this video is just going to be a kind of a rambling, not going to really edit it. So we're just going to put this thing together. I'm going to say some stupid things, but we're just going to roll with it. So we're going to have 3 different sampling methods. And you've probably all heard of your grandpa or somebody else talking about how they sampled earthworms with a phone cord or a generator or hook an electrical line into the ground. That's the first method, and that's the most scientific based method. Well, there's 2 that are acceptable. I guess all 3 of them are acceptable, but this one's the one most people use because it's a known area, and what it's called is an octet. And if you look at these 3 PVC pipes, what we would do is place these would be metal rods that we put in here, and we would have an electrode hooked up to each one of them. There would be an inverter hooked to a generator. The generator would generate AC current, and then we'd convert it to a DC current, put it in the ground. We'd clear this off, and then we would hook 3 different, or the different electrodes on here, and we would put electricity in the ground. It's like a 1/2 amp. There's a earthworm right there, and we'll talk about the 3 different kinds of earthworms. These are what we call epigeic earthworms. They're at the surface. They're typically small. They're real bright red in color typically, and that just acts as a camouflage, and it also protects them from UV radiation. So earthworms that are epigeic, think of your skin, epidermis is at the surface. So these earthworms live at the surface. They're very active in composting the litter. So these earthworms move along the surface. They typically are right here. There's another one back in here. Bright red earthworms. They're going to be more your surface feeders. They move kind of vertically in the soil because they're right here at the top. They really don't burrow much. So this would be a good method to get those. And what we do when I get back to the electrodes, we have them hooked up at opposite electrodes. So we would send electricity to these 2 for a pulse of 30 seconds, then send them to these 2 for 30 seconds, then to these 2, and we would spiral around. And what that does is kind of corkscrews the worms up out of the ground, and the worms would come to the surface with the electrical current going into the surface. So this is called an octet sampler, O-C-T-E-T, octet sampling. So we would have this shocking, pulling worms out, and obviously you don't want to grab them when the electrical current's going to it, or you're going to get shocked. But it just keeps a known area, and you sample the worms inside this ring. So we would sample earthworms via electrical conductivity is one method. A second method is actually mustard powder. We would mix it with a solution of water and just pour it on a known area of soil. So we'd pour a mustard solution on the soil, and it's a skin irritant. So again, you'd get the worms to come to the surface, sample them within that known area. The third method of sampling is the one we're gonna do today, and it's just called a shovel test. And same thing, you can kind of use it as a quantitative method. You can shove the shovel into the ground, and you're gonna sample a known area. You'll just take this sample out, and what you're going to do is get a piece of wood or paper or something that you can roll out a tarp, and then just break this up, and what you're going to do is quantify all the earthworms you find in this soil. So we talked about epigeic earthworms. Those are the ones at the surface, bright red, and this is probably not the best place to dig an earthworm, but what we would find in the ground would be an endogeic earthworm. They're the soil movers. They really turn the soil, physically move the soil, create aeration. They're creating pores. So this is pretty dry here and compacted. Probably won't find any. But an endogeic earthworm is going to be kind of lighter, whitish gray in color. They're not going to be those real bright. There's one right there. Not going to be that bright red earthworm. So a lot grayer, almost clear white. You can see the stuff, the organs inside of it, the dirt moving through it. So these things are burrowers. They're going to reuse some trails sometimes, but a lot of times they're creating new pores when they go through the soil. So move a lot of soil. The other ones can post a lot of organic matter. The third worm is called an anecic worm, A-N-E-C-I-C, anecic, and they're burrowing worms that have perennial burrows that they reuse over time. So if you think about night crawlers, the things that come out at night, you know, when you run around with a flashlight and find night crawlers on the soil surface, they're coming up to the surface to feed on this organic matter. They also feed on soil, so they kind of feed on both. So we have epigeeic at the surface, endogeeic in the soil. They move more laterally, and then anecic worms move up and down. They're burrowers. So if you think about these three methods, which kinds of worms are you going to actually capture? That method, you're going to capture with the octet, the worms at the surface, and then the anecic worms that move up and down. The ones that move laterally are going to laterally move away from that electrical current. They're not going to come to the surface, so you're not going to capture those. So it's kind of a biased sample. The mustard is going to be the same way. If you put the mustard powder on the soil, you're going to sample more of the epigeeic and anecic worms. The ones at the surface are the ones that burrow up. If you pour that solution down in their burrow, they're going to come up to get away from it. The endogeeic are more difficult to sample for because, like I said, they burrow and they move laterally. So the way we're going to sample these is with the shovel test. So you just take a square, half square meter, excavate all that soil to a certain depth. When you report this, you're going to say I excavated a hole that was 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot deep, so a 1 cubic foot of soil. So this is what I want you to do for your assignment, is you're going to come out and you're going to go to at least 2 different land uses. So you could choose a forest land use, an urban lawn, a pasture, a floodplain versus an upland, whatever 2 land uses you want to choose. But I want you to go out and dig 3 holes per land use. So if you're in the forest, dig 3 separate holes and just count the earthworms. We typically do numbers, so we look at species richness, how many different species there, or species diversity would be the number of species. The species richness is just the number that you find. And then we typically quantify biomass. So we'd throw these earthworms in an oven, dry them, bake them down, and get a dry weight so we can look at earthworm biomass. And this whole thing's just getting at a soil fauna. Earthworms can be both good and bad. Out east, they're actually consuming a lot of the organic matter from the soil surface. So these forests are actually losing organic matter over time in the soil. So it's going to impact the long-term productivity of those forests. We typically think of them as a very good thing because they're tillers of the earth. They kind of create aeration. They create soil aggregation. They move nutrients up and down through the profile. Most of your earthworms are going to be found in that upper 6 to 12 inches of soil because that's where all the biological activity is. That's where the organic matter is. That's what they feed on. So their food source is in that upper surface. Some of your anecic worms are going to burrow deeper than that. The night crawlers will burrow, you know, a couple feet deep at times, and they go beyond that, but they're going up to the surface to get their food. So they're passing through that upper A horizon, that mineral soil that has a lot of organic matter, and up into the litter layer at night. So they're catching that litter layer as well. So remember, again, going through the 3 different worms, epigeeic, these ones at the surface here, bright red if you see them. There's one right there, bright red. You can see it's camouflage. Here was an endogeeic worm. There's the color difference. Epigeeic, endogeeic, and I'm not going to be able to dig a night crawler at this time of day. Obviously they're going to be deeper than I'm going to be willing to dig. And then you typically find those at night, just on the soil surface, so you can run around with a flashlight in your yard. Some people don't have them in their yards, and if you want them in your yard, you can go buy some night crawlers at Walmart or at your local bait shop and throw them out there, and they're going to establish over time. There's the best earthworm digger you'd ever seen right there. He might find a night crawler. He thinks something's down there, but So going over the 3 methods again, we've got the octet electrical shock method, we've got the mustard where we pour the solution on the soil surface and then wait a period of time and collect all the earthworms, and then the shovel method. So again, for your assignment, I want you to go out and dig your own holes. Hopefully everybody has a shovel and a place they can go dig 6 holes, because I want 3 in each land use. Quantify those earthworms. I just want the numbers and talk about it. Discuss why you think there's more. Kind of classify your hole as you go down. So, you know, was there more organic matter in one land use than the other? Was there a thicker litter layer? Was the soil more moist? What were the conditions? So just talk about soil characteristics a little bit. Talk about the depth you found these earthworms. Did you see a lot of soil pores created by earthworms? So some macro porosity, or was most of your earthworms concentrated up at the surface? And try to tell me if they were anecic or epigeic or endogeic. They're probably not going to be anecic unless you dig your hole at night. You might find some of those earthworm or night crawlers on the surface. But so I want that to be your report. If you don't have a place to dig a hole or don't have access to a shovel, just email me and I'll give you some made-up data. But I want, you know, this is a soils lab, a hands-on lab, and it's difficult to get you guys out in the field. I can't do much here remotely, so I'm just urging you to go out and dig your own hole. Surely you can find a place to go dig, but if you can't, email me and I'll give you some numbers to quantify for 2 different land uses. Because we typically do this lab, we'll do the octet and then we'll do the shovel test, and we'll do it in a no